Hello, and welcome. Let's continue with the.
But in the interest of time, I won't. So,
so this guy just said that there is no biological sex, and for the interest of time, I won't explain what I mean by it. And now he just goes around and round and never addresses why he thinks there's no basis for biological sex. But I'm sure he's not the only leftist thinker who thinks that there's no biological sex. I'm interested that for example, our countries, people who decide stuff know that there is such a thing as biological sex, because as far as I know, this is the only part here on the page 19 when biological differences even come up, and it's only one sentence that says that the differences between gender are not only dependent on biology. Never opens it anymore, never opens it really much, or what is based on biology. So if you would just read this, I have read this like 2/3 or away in, and just judging by the headlines and topics here discussed, I don't think they do discuss the biology of gender anymore in this book. So what do they think is actually biology, or is it just that yes, now we can teach whatever because we just denied biology of sex?
that's a very popular misconception. So essentially, when in my transgender studies classes, what we're doing is looking at actual research and identifying ways that current social issues related to trans people or things that are associated with trans, such as free speech arguments and claims, how that connects to the way that people are thinking, the way that research has been framed, the histories.
Give us some of the other pronouns that one would hear, typically.
I don't focus on pronouns because pronouns are actually part of a cisnormative culture. So what we do is learn about...
I'm going to stop you right there.
Yeah, I was just about to explain.
Good.
So we don't start from a cisnormative perspective because that can't actually go very far.
What does
Yeah, cisnormative perspective can't go really far, except it works for like 99.9% of people. But yeah, it can't go really far, you know. The extra 0.3%, I bet you don't even talk about how many actual trans people are there. Because we are making such a huge concessions on everybody's freedoms. The freedom to say what we want in regards to do we use he, she, or something else. And it's not only problem with that we want to be assholes and not say they or she or whatever they want. If it was just that, whatever, we could do it. But it's just that then if the misgendering becomes a crime, then, you know, if you call me boy, you could be misgendering me, because that day I might be, my gender identity might be off somehow. My gender identity might be that day just, you know, both or neither, you know. Whatever it takes to get you into jail because you misgendered me, you know. So we can't really have such a odd thing if it's phrased that badly in the law, because it will make endless chaos in the society. People will be misgendering each other all the time.
cisnormative mean?
So I'm going to start us there. Cisnormative is basically the very popular idea and assumption that most people probably have, and definitely that our structures convey, that there is such a thing as male and female, that they connect to being a girl or a
There is such a thing as male and female, you idiot.
boy or a man or a woman, and then sometimes that will also recognize intersex or trans people or transsexual people, as you mentioned, because that's sometimes also referred to as a gender binary. So anything that fits within a gender binary can work within cisnormativity.
Okay.
But cisnormativity is basically that everyone assumes that there is male and female, and so very little is actually looked at to understand what's actually the case. And scientists have been doing this for
Because
at
your
least
view
over
would be
50 years.
your view would be it's much more complicated than that.
Right, it's not my view. I just know that for over 50 years, scientists have shown that that's not true, and yet our social systems haven't been able to find a way to address the level of complexity that people actually experience.
Over 50 years we've known this in our science. No, not really. It's even now highly debated. But to come again to this also teaches political activism when you are in elementary school. Yes, truly. There's the idea that everything is sexist, everything is racist, and you need to point it out. You are being taught in elementary school how if you see something sexist, how you can make it into start some petition, do some political activism, etc. Because that's a good idea to teach everyone. And also, we are having this debate: is there biological sex or not? And are there billion genders or not? And you keep changing the goalpost. You just say that no, it's just men and women. Somewhere along the gender spectrum, there's men, women, gender spectrum. You can be there. But what you're actually thinking and you want to do is just deny biological sex, and you are just saying this now that you get this all into law, and then you can come out and, biological sex, well, hate speech. It's hatred against trans people if you talk about it. So you don't get to talk about it, you don't get to study it, you don't get to do anything, because it's hatred now. What the fuck? What a bullshit, really. What bullshit move try to do this? And the thing here is that if you teach the next generation that it's some gender spectrum or whatever, or not really teach it in any concrete way or any, you will not achieve equality because you don't understand the differences. You could never achieve equality because you don't understand that their equality. How can you have equality if you have two different things and you are trying to get them to be equal, but you don't recognize that they are two different things? You're trying to fit them into the same model, same genderless model. So crazy.
Step in, Steve.
Stand by for a second, because I want to let everybody else get in first,
And I
then
didn't
we'll get you
interrupt
in.
you either, so.
Mary, how prevalent is transgenderism in our world?
I don't think I can answer that question.
I don't think I want to answer that question because 0.3% would really sound bad. It would really sound like 99.7% of the people are making huge concessions so that 3% can get this small thing that in the long run doesn't even help them in any measurable or good way, but just causes endless confusions in the society. And what I mean by it doesn't help them is the idea that there's no law right now here in Finland, and until 2016 there hasn't been even talk here that, oh my god, if there is like a Stephanie there and I call her he, I just keep on calling her he, I should go to jail. I should it should be hate speech and it should be regarded. No one does that actually, because I mean, misgendering intentionally, it's a big thing to do, but I would hope that people should learn to be strong individuals in a way that they can cope with it. They can cope with that they're being misgendered and that it doesn't affect them to necessarily take their lives, because that would be just really stupid. Like, really like seem that they are these not really even people, not really they are not expecting the same kind of mental strength, etc. They're just so weak that you say he and they just kill themselves right off the bat. I don't choose to believe that. That seems sexist, I guess. I don't know, transphobic at least, because I think they are people. I think they can live with it. If the other possibility is it causes endless confusions as people are going to go to jail or get fined or whatever because they misgendered someone who act like a woman and talk like a woman and identify as woman, but or are no, not identify as woman, identify as man, but are also biologically woman or something like this, or identify as both or whatever.
I think that I would agree with Nicholas that there is some discrepancy on these numbers, and there is some variance on the numbers. I guess I'm curious as to why we need to put a number on this, because that's come up. I listened to George.
Because needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, or needs of the few outweigh needs of the many. But we would maybe like to know the facts, the numbers, how much they are, so we can make an intelligible guess or intelligible decision on how we want to proceed with this problem, with the supposed problem with the law, if you want to be really gentle to the opposing side.
Jordan's video, and that was something that was mentioned. You know, this is statistically, you know, there are so few intersex people as to be, it's insignificant.
Well, I think there's a reasonable curiosity as to whether or not we're talking about half the population or less than 1% of the population. That's all.
No, I understand.
We are talking right now less than 1%. But
Understand that. I guess what I'm saying is, it seems that there's a focus on that in terms of what we know now, and I think what Nicholas is trying to say, and I don't want to presume too much. I think that number is going to be something that evolves as we evolve and our language evolves, and we give people the room to come forward and express who they are.
Okay, let me, as part of that expression and evolution of this issue, the use of non-traditional pronouns. Where are you on that?
I think people should be able to say how they want to be addressed. I do believe that. In my own experience in
so people should be able to dictate other people how they are addressed. Well, call me your majesty then, I guess.
writing the Walrus piece, you know, I began at one place and ended at another. And I'll let everyone pay their $7 to find out how they can buy the magazine. But I think that for me, you know, identifying as male at a very late stage in my life, I didn't have a lot of attachment to the pronoun she. You could have said giraffe. I had found a way at a very early age not to even hear that word. It meant nothing to me.
Yeah, so you didn't feel the need to kill yourself and you were fine. So, yeah, really throwing holes in the theory of that other person.
So I didn't dive into the pronoun he.
So if I were going to refer to you, though, in the third
They.
person, you
They.
would want me to call you they?
Yes.
Okay, because
Yeah, no. Like, you know, when you are learning to ride a bike for first time, you have these training wheels on your bike so that you don't fall over. So this person wants training wheels. Is like changing from female to male. So now he is on the between. So now it's they, and then when she feels just right, then we're supposed to change to he or she. Like, sounds like a lot of mollycoddling to do. Like, doesn't sound really like reasonable to have all these stages in the cocoon and development. I would be more open if there wasn't about this freedom of speech aspect to it. I would be more open if he or she just chose he or she, of course, but that sounds like really mollycoddling there.
that encapsulates what?
I think it reflects where I am right now. I because of my lived experience, you know, 5 decades as being identified, certainly by the world as female, some of the time, not all of the time, my lived experience was largely female. And I personally am not sort of ready to jump in wholly into having people call me he, but I'm certainly far enough along in terms of, you know, how I feel internally that I don't want to be called she.
So you want training wheels for this gender thing. Like, this seems like a special pandering you want for yourself. You wanna feel special. You wanna feel like you are a special snowflake. You are one and only, and you have all these different rules how to address you, etc.
Understood. Let's go to British Columbia. Theron, I want you to help us understand, for our viewers who don't know you and don't know your work, I would like you to describe yourself.
Well, I I make political commentary mostly on YouTube, and I mostly focus on basically countering with my own personal perspectives, countering what I consider to be the kind of hegemony surrounding the political hegemony surrounding trans politics, and what I consider to be quite ridiculous opinions and demands coming from what has come to be known as the kind of the political trans lobby.
I'm not as good at this issue as I should be, so I'm going to look to you to help me use the right words here to describe how you were born and what you see yourself as now. So is it accurate to say you're a trans woman?
Yes, I wish I lived in a world where that was just obvious and I don't have to explain that to people, but apparently I do. I mean, yes, I'm just a woman.
Is this to say you were born male but now are female?
Yes, I transitioned from male to female.
In which case, do I refer to you, I'm going to ask you the same question I asked Mary, which is, do I refer to you as her or she now?
Yes, you do.
I do.
That is very helpful. Yes, you do. Do I either call you man or she? Yes, you do. Very odd.
Okay. And how do you relate to the experiences that we have heard arise during this debate where gender identities and pronouns are up for grabs, if you like?
I'm very skeptical of the ideology surrounding gender identity. I don't believe there are 29 plus gender identities or genders. I believe there's male and female, and then there's somewhere in between, and most people fall along that. And just people who are in between does not constitute a new gender. There are two genders, period. And that is biologically a sound argument to make, just because the argument that was made earlier in the show is that, or it wasn't an argument, but a claim that there is no such thing as biological sex. Well, that's simply not true. It is true that there are multiple characteristics and there are multiple factors that go into determining sex, and that sex is not an on-off switch, that there is a spectrum to it, just like with most things in nature. Most things aren't an on-off switch, most things develop like on a spectrum. But for the most part, the vast majority of people fall either on the male side or on the female side. And yes, it's true that scientists, that doctors have and researchers have been finding more and more factors that go into not only determining genetic sex, but determining the expression of those genes. So it's truly a fascinating, complex field of study, but that does not mean that there is no such thing as biological sex.
Okay.
When it comes to the issue of pronouns, would you like me to
briefly, if you would, because Kyle has been the most patient person in the world waiting for his chance to get in. So yes, you finish your statement and then I'm going to get to Kyle.
Okay, my apologies. Well, firstly, I have a lot of sympathy for people who want to be referred to by their pronouns. Obviously, as a trans woman, I know what it feels like to be misgendered and whatnot. And most people are reasonable in the sense that they would be reasonable enough to accommodate trans people and their preferred pronouns. And I'm sure, I mean, I would hope that if I were a student of Dr. Peterson, that he would refer to me as she and wouldn't have a problem with that. But at the end of the day, you know, a personal pronoun preference still is a preference for what language other people use. And at the end of the day, I don't have ultimate control over what Dr. Peterson, what the language he chooses to use, or anybody else for that matters. That's up to them.
Okay, let me find out then.
The problem arises.
Let me find out. If she were a student of yours, what would you call her?
She.
You would. Okay. We've established that. Theron, stand by for a second now. I do want, thank you for your patience, Professor Kirkup, and I want to bring you in now because...
that was really interesting because, like, he's been so adamant about not using the special gendered pronouns, but then when the girl was being reasonable and it wasn't about political agenda, it wasn't about being felt to feel special in some odd special snowflake way, then yes, he accommodated instantly and said without batting an eye that she wanted, even though I guess if he would have liked, he could have said he or they, or I don't know.
As I suggested earlier, in New York City, they have identified 31 gender identities, and apparently the law down there suggests that if businesses don't accommodate an individual's chosen gender identity, there is the risk of a six-figure fine under the rules of the city's Commissioner of Human Rights. We have in the province of Ontario our own Ontario Human Rights Commission, and I wonder how similar our legislation is here on this issue compared to what they have in New York City.
So where I would start the discussion is to actually point that, even though we're talking about adding gender identity and gender expression to the Canadian Human Rights Act and provisions of the Criminal Code, this is a long-standing practice in Canadian human rights jurisprudence. You can go back into the late 1990s, and the cases that we're seeing in the tribunals are not the kind of extreme examples of a number of different kinds of gender pronouns. What we're seeing is really more basic human rights questions. So questions like, are you required to undergo surgery in order to have an identity document that properly captures who you are as a person? Discrimination in policing contexts, discrimination in the workplace. And so I think the pronoun issue is really a red herring. When you look through the jurisprudence dating back to the 1990s, we're seeing much more fundamental questions, really basic human rights questions that are coming before the tribunals. And having reviewed the case law, I'm not seeing the kind of New York scenario that you're proposing at all.
Well, let me read some of the Ontario Human Rights Code to you, and then I'll get your feedback on that. Discrimination, the Human Rights Code says, happens when a person experiences negative treatment or impact, intentional or not, because of their gender identity or gender expression. It can be direct and obvious or subtle and hidden, but harmful just the same. It can also happen on a bigger systemic level, such as organizational rules or policies that look neutral but end up excluding trans people. Organizations are liable for any discrimination and harassment that happens. They are also liable for not accommodating a trans person's needs unless it would cause undue hardship. And again, Kyle, I'll get you to follow up on that, in as much as if a trans person or somebody whose gender identity was more, shall we say, complicated than the male-female that we've been talking about so far, and the pronoun used to describe that person were not traditional, would the person have a case before the Human Rights Commission?
So we haven't seen cases on that at this point, but I would say absolutely as a general rule that you should be thinking about in terms of employment settings, absolutely respecting trans persons' pronoun choice is really fundamental. And I can also say that in lots of circumstances, a pronoun may not even be required. There are lots of creative ways to avoid using gendered pronouns at all. And so I think that
yeah, but I'm not gonna try to remember to go all these mental hoops when I'm talking, so that I don't intentionally or unintentionally misgender someone. Like, do you even understand what you are asking? I'm not sure anymore.
But when you actually look at the cases that are coming before tribunals, we're not seeing that to be really the primary issue. It's much more basic human rights questions, which is what the federal legislation here, Bill C-16, tries to accomplish.
All right, I think we've set the table now. You want to get in on this now, I can tell.
So, wow, we only went through all the people in this discussion, all had their opening statements and introductions. But this is actually very good still coming up. We are now almost at the half point about. So let's continue in the next interesting episode.